Okay, so we are doing the Reb Tzadok on the Pesach from the Pitzadik Simon Beis, which is a very fundamental piece, which tells us basically how to we should be inspired the night of the Seder. So to go back to standard view here. Okay, so the it says the I don't like that view either. Uh, it's fine. Okay, so Gemara says, "Lechem." And somebody has something to say, just jump in or chat. Gemara says, "Lechem oni shoni malav dorim harbi." The matzah is called lechem oni. Lechem oni, according to this Joshua Gazal, is the bread on which you respond many things. Fine, tzorach lios derech shela b'tshuva. Onim to respond means there has to be derech shela b'tshuva. There has to be that there is a question and answer. Haben shoel manishtana. The son asks manishtana, but mishivo, and the father responds. Like Gemara says there, Psachim. If bno sholo, if you have a son, your son asks you the question. Ishto sholo. If not, then your wife asks the question. Being lab, who shoel atzmon? If not, he asks his own questions. V'chein ma'amara gamliel. Also, so that's how the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim takes place. Q&A. But the stress is you gotta speak. You have to say things and explain things. So too in Rav Gamliel's statement. Also Q&A. Why are we eating matzah? Mora al shuma. Mora why? We don't say it just generically. Matzah shanu ochlim. Al shem shlo speak. We don't say just, well, we're eating matzah because the dough didn't have a chance to rise. Rak derech sheila v'tshuva. It's a question and answer. Why? So why specifically a question and answer? And again, the question and answer is even if you don't have somebody to ask you the questions, you have to ask the questions of yourself. So why is that to be that way? So, so it says, Vainu. So it says, Tzadok Shabalayla, this night, Lagish Benavsho Chadashos. A person has to feel in his soul newness, renewal. So Tzarech Liros Adam Es Atzmo Kil Yotz Mitzrayim. A person has to see himself as if he himself is leaving Mitzrayim. And the only way to feel that way is not by reciting things, but asking oneself things. In other words, asking provokes that frame of mind, that thought process. Okay, what's a new way in which I can understand Yetzias Mitzrayim? You know, when Noach Weinberg says in Judaism, we value questions much more than answers. Questions are extremely important because questions provoke thought. Answers sometimes provoke thought, but sometimes they stop thought. Okay, we got to an answer. But a good question provokes more and more thought and provokes new vistas, new ideas. That's what the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said about the Shev Shmaitzer, which is a very famous sefer from the early 18th century, that the reason why it's such an enduring sefer and such a classic is because you can argue on everything he says. Because the idea in Judaism is not that we should be able to have the definitive answer. On the contrary, we want to ask more and more questions. So I was just reading somewhere that some Gioris had written that one of the things that attracted to Judaism is that in whatever religion she came from, they discouraged questions, and in Judaism, on the contrary, we encourage questions. We want you to ask questions. The more questions, the better. The questions, the better. The Maharal says somewhere, he says that some people have the tendency to think that it's better to tell people not to ask questions and to just, keep the faith. Maharal says that's very bad. He says, gives a mushal. He says if you have a champion boxer, so how does if he doesn't allow people to challenge him, he's never going to prove he's a champion. He can't prove he's a champion who's not going to box. He has to accept opponents. He has to accept challengers, and he has to prove I'm the champion. I can beat all comers. So the point is that we want challenge. We want people to ask questions. The greatest tragedy in the Seder is the Sheinu Yodei Lishol, right? He doesn't know what to ask. So you have to get him to ask. You have to open up the door for that person. So, and all this is v'hainu she'oz hirgish adam b'nafsho hergesh chazak sheyatza min ha-yetzer. Now, then a person felt that they left the yetzer. Now, yetzer doesn't necessarily mean here the yetzer, although that is obviously what he means on a simple level. But it means any meitzar, mina meitzar karasi ka, any confines, any restrictions which a person felt restricted his soul, which a person feels the entire year restrict the soul, which doesn't allow his soul to express itself. The night of Pesach, you're supposed to make sure to leave that meitzar, that narrow confines. And the Yetzer Hara does that to us. The Yetzer Hara confines us, restricts us, and tells us, okay, this is the way it has to be. So the I don't say the question on the chat, but okay. So in any event, so he says, you have to feel it with an actual sense of reality that you're leaving Mitzrayim. And the Piasetzner has a whole description, if you're good at meditation and visualization and imagery, how you can actually do it in a very tangible, I shouldn't say tangible because it's visualization, but how a person can actually go through it in his mind's eye and see himself as if he leaves Mitzrayim. But I don't know necessarily what Tzadok is saying. You have to actually go through the visualization of seeing yourself working on the pyramids and being beaten down by Egyptians and seeing kids being buried in the wall of the pyramids and then experiencing the Makos and leaving, which is great. A person could do that. But that's Tzadok is going on the hergish, on the emotion, not on the actual imagery necessarily. But a person has to feel that he's kilu yotzi time. V'loy davar etzlo kedavar hergel. It shouldn't be like something which, okay, something which I'm accustomed to do. Even so, it comes accustomed to do as a mitzvah. All other mitzvahs, we don't ask al shuma, and certainly doesn't say the person's not fulfilling his obligation unless he makes a statement and understands the reason. But these are all things where a person has to know, I'm eating matzah mara because it's supposed to give me a feeling I left Mitzrayim. Again, not necessarily that I visualize it, which is a wonderful thing, but a feeling I leave Mitzrayim. And so to the entire takana of the first dipping. Amru, they said, the dip the vegetable in the salt water at the beginning, in order that it should be something which the children should recognize are doing things different. Person should become aroused at the beginning of the Seder. Why is this the night different than all other nights? You're going out of your normal pattern behavior to leave behind behavior which is unthinking. The first question comes, Al tibu yirakos, and dipping vegetables. Shizaya kilas adam arishon. That this is the curse of Adam Rishon. It's a fascinating thing. Karpas, according to Tzadok, refers to Chet Adam Rishon. That's the first thing we ask about. What is the impact of Chet Adam Rishon? And obviously, the impact of Chet Adam Rishon is that to be Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because without Chet Adam Rishon, then the Gula would have come. There would not have been the Shibud Mitzrayim. There would not have been the subjugation of Mitzrayim. There would not have been the redemption from Mitzrayim. So everything goes back to the Chet of Adam Rishon. All of creation is unpacking the results of the Chet of Adam Rishon. That's the first thing we dip. Before he sinned, all man ate was fruit, which came off a tree. Then Adam Rishon was cursed. They have to eat the grasses of the field. Once he started sweating, the said, I and my donkey are eat out of the same feed bag. Said, since you started sweating, you felt very anxious about this, you felt embarrassed about it, you'll eat bread. Now, It's not going to grow on trees, because I'll say that in that Lusty Levo, the eventual future, bread is going to grow on trees. Not now. It has to be worked at. But the point is that the idea is that an elevated form of eating. Can be Yetzias Mitzrayim, and here after Yetzias Mitzrayim, Achar Makkah series after the 10th Makkah, Sheyotzu Yisrael Mikolas Klipos, when Am Yisrael left all the 10 Madregos of Tumah. I know there are 50 Sharei Tumah, but those are also connected to the 10 Spheros, and the 10 Spheros have a corresponding negative Klipos. Minilsu Esamios the Kedusha, and they came into the 10 Midos of the Kedusha. Shekain, who Eser Makos, because the 10 Makos were Nogov Mitzrayim. They afflicted the Egyptians, Barapoli, so they healed the Jews. Because, like it says in the Zohar, that each Makkah pushed the Egyptians lower and the Jews higher. He's still at Tikkun B'Kam Adam Rishon. After they got them to Madrega, they started being able to fix the sin of Adam Rishon. Now, at Chet Ego, came back with a vengeance. But at that point, they started being able to fix the Chet of Adam Rishon. And you have to feel the difference. She took kind of call that everything will be fixed. That there is this hope that eventually Adam Rishon's sin will be fixed. And the Yetzer Hara, which will not, which is the mashal of Chazal is like the sourdough in the dough, that'll go away. To feel that I'm here to fix the Chet of Adam Rishon, and I'm here to feel a renewal in that quest, the quest to fix the Chet of Adam Rishon, and to bring about the ultimate Geula. I'm here to do that by feeling that I can leave behind my restrictions and my normal patterns. A person has to feel as a Chol Pesach, her Gesh Mechudash, with a new emotion. V'shinui this difference. Shalayla zeh mishum mechol leilos. That this night is different than all other nights, in that I can be different. Shebezeh margish kilu yotze mitzrayim. V'after kati avdei Achashverosh on. The Gemara says that the reason why I don't say Hallel on Purim is because we still are the slaves of Achashverosh. So it means we're still in Golus. That's after Purim, they're still in Golus. And of course, now after the night of the Seder, we're going back. We're back to our normal lives of Golus. Even living there, it's still obviously a state of Golus. So, nevertheless, Halu Avdei Hashem, Halu Avdei Paro. Now we're Avdei Hashem, not Avdei Paro. We thank Halu Avdei Hashem means that that some aspect remain with us. Shemizek Faratzanu. For that, we already left. Shaloya Shibu Kazek Mitzrayim. What was the Shibud in Mitzrayim? Why was that so much worse than a regular Shibud? Shekifa Klipa Mikol Tzad. They're surrounded from this klipa from the tumah, a mitzrayim on all sides. Like it says, a goy from within another goy, from a nation within another nation. Kubra may emo like a fetus in its mother's womb. And that we left. In other words, Am Yisrael maintains its unique qualities even when it is absorbed in other nations. That in Mitzrayim they almost lost completely. They would say, Chazal say, some different places, they didn't change their names, they didn't change their mode of dress, they didn't change their language, but other than that, they were the same. And by Kriyas Yamsuf, it says that the Malachim came and they complained. What's in between the Jews and the non-Jews? They're both on the same level. I love the Zohar, love over there the Zohar. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim culminated in Matan Torah. After Matan Torah, the Malachim would not have said such a thing. Because Am Yisrael became basically different at that point. And Am Yisrael retains now the capacity to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a sense of connection and not just I'm sort of saying here, an intellectual level, but also an emotional level. And a person has to feel every time, B'chol shana yitzia mechudeshes kilu yatsa mitzrayim. Person has to feel every year a new yitzia as if he himself has left Mitzrayim. Now, like I said before, the Sfarim say, the Tzadok himself says that elsewhere, Mitzrayim is a lashon of meitzar, a narrowness. And a person the night of the Seder has to feel a sense of mina meitzar, karasi ka, nani ba merchav ka. I came from a narrow place, I came to a high place. And that's an important point because most of us, the night of the Seder, I shouldn't say most of us, a lot of us, the night of the Seder, we get caught up in the details of the Seder, which are great. Seder is a fantastic time. And we get caught up in the intellectual aspect of the Seder, which is, especially if kids come home with notebooks full of Divrei Torah to say, and you have somebody who's running the Seder, who himself has Divrei Torah to say, has looking to every Haggadah to see this board, this idea, that idea. So the Seder can become a very profound intellectual activity. So Tzadok is stressing it's not like that. Tzadok is saying that it has to be a hergish. And all and he's interesting the way he's deriving that. From the beginning of the piece, he said that the fact that it has to be question and answer and not just statements means there's somehow that is supposed to provoke in me not just an intellectual state understanding, but also it's supposed to provoke in me contemplation. And the contemplation is supposed to lead to an emotional sense. I feel that I'm left Mitzrayim. Not I know I left Mitzrayim, but I feel I left Mitzrayim. I think that's a very hard avodah. It's a statement from the tells of Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Yosef Leib Bloch. He says that which is exact opposite of Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler says that the Seder was planned by Chazal to be a way to arouse the emotions, but it's so the I'm not sure. They give me very little time. They give me another 11 minutes. The Seder's give me a way to arouse the emotions by having all these experiences. So the Rabbi Yosef Bloch says, I don't understand. If the Seder was supposed to arouse emotions, we should make like a passion play, like they make in Christianity. You know, they have in order to show with great pageantry and fanfare everything which went on with their Savior. We don't do anything at all. We eat a little matzah, a little bit of mar. So it's not the same thing as having a tremendous pageant and play and drama and all that which we could have. So Rabbi Yosef Bloch says that in pageantry, it provokes very, very stirring emotions. These are subtle emotions. To feel the sense of freedom is not the sense of freedom of spirit of material freedom, and it's not to provoke even a sense of grandeur and majesty and pageantry. It's to evoke a subtle feeling. I have a neshama. My neshama is very often restrained and shackled by the things that's going on in my life. I feel now that neshama can express itself more. The neshama is free because I was given a very special depth to it. And depth is not an easy thing to reach. You can get superficiality is very easy to affect. Depth is very, very, very hard to arouse. So therefore, the Seder is meant to arouse through this question and answer, this sense in the neshama that I have a special freedom, which came from the fact because Baruch took me on Mitzrayim, which lasts no matter where I find myself and how many things are burdening me on a superficial level. I have this neshama which is connected now because of Mitzvah Mitzrayim to Kosh Baruch Hu, and this must give me the power to say to have new insights as well. And he says in the next piece, I don't want to do the whole piece because I'm afraid it's going to cut me off at some point. He says, "Mitzvah leinu saper Mitzrayim ena kavanah sipur bilvad." It's not just tell the story. Shall say it's chachma. Don't need chachma for that. She'akol dvarim ksuvim and everything's written down. So why kulana chachamim, kulana neboni, kulana skeni, kulana within the Torah? Raka ikar k'moshe amarnu lachnis habihirus b'leif to put clarity into the heart. Kilu yatzim Mitzrayim, like he left Mitzrayim. She'argish ze b'nafsho, and you should feel it's in his soul deep down. K'moshe argishu az simcha v'cheres she'yatzim milayzer, like they felt then the simcha v'cheres when they left on that night. V'alzeh amru. Even though it has a simple meaning, they were told over that entire night, but that they can speak about at great length. But the primary thing is not to speak about great length. That's a tool. To put this clarity in your heart. Even if you're ready, you're a big chacham. What do you have to deal with it? You know it all by heart already. You know cold. You need this idea of Mitzvah Mitzrayim. At the night of Pesach, because Baruch brings together his entire family. Go and listen to the story of my praise. The Kamash that my children are telling over. Why is the Shevach different? Because Baruch takes special pride in the praise of in the night of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Ikar hasimcha shemargish ha'adam b'Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's the simcha again, not the telling over. That's the superficial form of the mitzvah. It's the simcha a person feels b'Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim kilu yotza mitzrayim. He says interesting thing in Kabbalistically. It's after he came out of the Shiva Midas Tachtonos, which are the major physical and manifest spheros, which are the spheres, which are the 7 lower ones. To get to the higher spheres, where things are on a very abstract level, deep inside. So he says it's not enough to arouse the lower spheres, which are the ones which have very powerful midos and character manifestations are connected with them. You have to get to the higher midos where subtle things take place. So, and then he goes into the idea of how the spheres, I don't want to take the time to go into now, but he says that each sphere corresponds to a different each of the makas corresponds to a different sphera, and he says makas arba shemakas shminis. He says the 8th makkah is arba. By the way, arba is lashon ribui, right? To me marbe besipur. And when the 8th midah from the bottom, the 8th from the bottom is bina. So that's to say, b'nei bina yemei shmona kabu shirinanim by Chanukah. So you need to get to the midah of bina, his bainanus, of analysis, of understanding deeply, in order to be properly marbe, be Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. So his bainanus is in order to be able to understand better the simcha, which is supposed to feel deep inside. And then he goes into another more of this. But he says, and v'hu lechem she'onim dvarim harbe, the Sabbath is trying to come more. And it says that, and Reb Tzadok says elsewhere, it brings down that Chazal say that Pesach is a lashon of Pesach, right? Peh, the mouth, Sach, discourses, speaks, elaborates, and discusses. And he says the idea. He says that there's a chiyuv. The night of Pesach, I don't know how big a chiyuv, but there's an obligation to come up with new insights every year. The idea is that, again, ischachus, a new sense. It shouldn't be the last year's sense. And that's very hard, because a lot of us have our favorite vertlach, which you go back to year after year after year. I have my favorite agada I like to use year after year after year, because I get a chiyus out of it. But the idea is, no, every Pesach person has to feel a new kilu yatsa mitzrayim, a new hargasha, a new feeling. This year, I feel a different level of simcha, and it's not easy, because we're even accustomed in simcha to feel always the same type of simcha. Because life is cyclical, and we always come back and go over again and again and again. So the idea is that each Pesach has to be something new, something different than it was before. So there's another thing. I don't know if I'm gonna have time to do it in depth, but he says that also b'layla zu yesh sholosh achilos mitzvah. The rest of the year we never make a bracha on eating. Only night of Pesach. And Pesach matzah mor. Pesach, even though we don't Pesach, Sham prays for Senu, we do it by, we mention it anyway, verbally. Each one of the mitzvahs, and he here explains, but you know what he explains is not important. Everybody has come with their own idea that each thing which we eat, the night of Pesach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, Chazal tell us, okay, I tell you what, I'm going to give you these tools, but they're, again, like Yosef Bloch says, they're very subtle tools. I'm telling you a basic idea, Pesach Matzah Maror. But then I want you to work on yourselves and come up with ideas to associate with them, which make you feel the simcha in them. And therefore, what Chazal are telling us is the mitzvahs night of Seder, Ashrei K'Neshama Tzavot Tzibanu al Achilas. We have matzah tomorrow. We don't have Pesach anymore. But Achila, there's a mitzvah of Achila this night. The rest of the year, we don't never make such a bracha al Achilas, whatever. There's a special power in the Achila that a person should contemplate when they're eating things. These ideas of hergish, of feeling deep inside, the simcha of cherus, the matzah, the simcha of having gone through the shibud, when it came out, of matzah. Obviously, Pesach, we had the Pesach, we have the simcha of the connection